Sworn in, and yet after 4 years, another first. Tonight, the House of Representatives overrode a presidential veto for the first time in the Trump era, overriding the president's veto of the annual defense spending bill. That's the bill that pays the salaries of the men and women in the armed forces and funds the nation's national security apparatus. The annual defense bill is typically passed with bipartisan support and a veto-proof majority. But Trump vetoed the bill last week anyway, in part because it called for renaming military bases named after the Confederacy. Tonight, the House overrode that veto by a vote of 322 to 87. Mitch McConnell says he expects the Senate will vote to override the veto as well, which would officially pass the defense spending bill into law. The override process in the Senate is set to begin tomorrow. More on that in a second. The House also passed a bill tonight introduced by Democrats to expand direct payments to eligible Americans as part of the sweeping COVID relief bill that Congress passed last week. Now, the bill would expand those payments from $600 for every adult to $2,000 per adult. More than two-thirds of the House voted for it, but its chances in the Republican-led Senate remain an open question. Now, that vote tonight is, of course, not a Democratic stunt. It's a direct response to Trump's own temper tantrum. After Congress passed the bill and sent it, it's a $900 billion relief bill to the president last week for his signature. Instead of doing what he should have done, putting pen to paper, he publicly attacked the bill, which was painstakingly debated for weeks. He demanded $2,000 cash payments to Americans, which is a good thing, except that it actually imperiled the passage of the existing bill. Ultimately, the president did sign the COVID relief bill late last night after teasing earlier in the day on Twitter that good news was coming on the COVID relief bill. Information to follow, he wrote. The bill will help struggling Americans. It's a good thing that the president has signed it, but it's important to pause for a second and take stock of what Trump did along the way. CNN reports today that the president originally planned to sign the COVID relief bill on Christmas Eve, the day it arrived at the president's resort in Mar-a-Lago. They set up a special ballroom for the occasion with a chair and a desk for Trump to use to sign the bill. But CNN reports that the plan was scrapped at the last minute because the president, quote, changed his mind. Letting that bill sit on his desk a few extra days got the president nothing. The bill he signed yesterday is the exact same bill that was handed to him almost a week ago. Besides creating a spectacle and snatching the news cycle, he got nothing that he wanted. It did have a real granular, devastating effect on millions of Americans who were relying on the financial assistance programs from the federal government so that they can put food on their tables during one of the worst economic disasters to ever hit this country. Because Donald Trump decided to stall the signing of the relief bill, all the financial assistance due to struggling Americans is now delayed. The unemployment assistance program expired on Saturday. Because the president waited until Sunday to sign the bill, the program lapsed. That means part-time workers, self-employed Americans, gig workers, instead of receiving $300 in federal assistance this week, they get $0 this week because the president's playing games. For Americans anxiously waiting for those $600 relief checks to put food on the table, to pay their rent, to make ends meet, they will have to wait days, maybe weeks longer because of the president's game playing. 14 million Americans rely on those federal assistance programs funded by this bill. Because of Trump, they had to endure extra days of unnecessary worry and pain. The president, of course, remains focused not on the real financial hardships that are faced by millions of Americans, but on his own selfish, petty interests. Here's the thing. While he was sitting on that important relief bill for the American people, Donald Trump spent the holiday weekend complaining about voter fraud that does not exist in his continued attempt to overthrow the results of the 2020 election. The president is running out of options to try and reinstall himself as president against the will of the people. The Electoral College has certified the results. Congress will officially count the electoral votes on January 6th, which will put the final seal on Joe Biden's victory. But now the president's harebrained scheme has gotten a boost from a sitting Republican member of Congress. Now, here's the thing. By law, the vice president, Pence, will oversee the counting of the electoral votes in Congress on January 6th. And so Texas Congressman Louis Gohmert has sued Vice President Mike Pence in federal court. What Louis Gohmert is asking the judge in this case to do is strike down the law that requires the vice president to oversee that count and empower the vice president to overturn the election results in battleground states and hand the election to Donald Trump instead. It sounds batty. It sounds like maybe I'm glossing over some key piece of context here, but I'm not. That's really what the president's ally in Congress, Louis Gohmert, is trying to do. And it's potentially not even the most madcap scheme that the president and his allies are cooking up. It certainly is not the most dangerous. For the past few weeks, the president has been signaling his support for a protest planned in Washington, D.C. on January 6th, the day that Congress will make Joe Biden's victory official. The protest is expected to be attended by armed right-wing groups, conspiracy theorists, and white supremacists who all support the president's bid to overturn the election. Trump told his supporters to, quote, be there. It'll be wild. Never give up. See everyone in D.C. on January 6th. These are his tweets. Experts on far-right movements say the protests could spark chaos and violence in the nation's capital. That in itself is scary. But it's how the president is reportedly considering wielding that violence that is raising real alarm bells. Earlier this month, the president's disgraced, newly pardoned National Security Advisor Michael Flynn suggested in a televised interview that the president should use his, quote, military capabilities, his words, to overturn the election. He called it martial law. Flynn suggested the president could essentially order troops into the swing states that he lost and use military force to rerun the election in those states to get the outcome he wanted. He actually said that.
You know, in all my life, I didn't think I really never thought that I would see the enemy within. Just the other day, I was taking some snapshots, and a group of looked like teenagers, young people, was holding this sign that said, "The terrorist is in the White House." After evaluating this and looking at all of this, I'm inclined to believe that maybe those teenagers that was holding that sign may have some sort of significance in what we're looking at here in the developmental stages that could actually turn into total chaos. Like I said, I don't think I've ever analyzed anything this this screwy. Because instead of bringing us together as a whole and uniting us, it's only going to tear us apart that much further. We've already been torn apart by screwy deals that's happened this year with Mr. Donald Trump. We've already been torn apart by not only the coronavirus, but the aftermath that come along with the coronavirus, such as displacency of jobs, restaurants shutting down, hospitals being overfilled, etc., etc., etc. Having to throw on, what, I guess, give or take about $5, maybe $6 trillion extra this year onto the national deficit just to be able to stay afloat. We've been torn apart as a nation. Politically speaking, financially speaking, medically speaking, morally speaking, we've been torn apart. And to add insult to misery, we have to worry about a lunatic stunt such as this in the developmental stages to tear us apart even further. And this president claims that he's for the people. This president claims that he's for bringing stability to the Union. This president claims that he has been the chosen one. If he's been the chosen one, what has he been chosen for? Disrupting a nation in its final stages of its election? This has got to be the most harebrained, screwy concept of an ideal that I think that I've ever come close to looking at in America, and that includes the Nixon scandals, that includes the Iran scandals. Out of all the scandals, this one here tops the top, boy. Because you know why? This one here could actually develop into bloodshed, especially in this day and time. And I think that's what Donald Trump is probably banking on. He's banking on that particular sector or that particular group of people that could actually launch into some sort of major campaign or crusade, whatever word you want to use, to the point of bringing bloodshed into America. This is the very thing, this type of thinking is the very thing that separated us and tore us apart during the Civil War. Which maybe that particular event that happened during the Civil War was a good thing. I would tend to want to believe that it was, because the end results, I believe, was a good thing towards freeing the black man and not allowing for slavery, open slavery, to be legal here in America. That was the final results of the Civil War, which I feel like was a good thing. And it did unify the Union. The Republic. But this right here makes my skin curl. This right here is sickening. This right here should be an eye opener for any true red-blooded American, especially whenever you're going to jeopardize your authority by over-accelerating military use purposely. Okay, this has been premeditated. This isn't something that they just thought of yesterday. This has been laid out, planned, a conspiracy, that this is how they're going to go about doing this. And this is where they're going to do it. And this is how they're going to do it. If this isn't a blood-curdling, hair-raising event that could escalate into something that people can't even begin to imagine the horrors of. You know, whenever you see the things on TV pertaining to wars, Hollywood has this special attraction to glamorify people starving, people being shot, killed, cut off arms and legs, and blowed up bodies. Hollywood has an attraction or a gift or a talent to be able to glamorify those things and make those things look very, very attractive and appealing in the eyes of many. The thing about war, There's nothing about war that is attractive. There is nothing about war that is fun. There is nothing about war that anybody in their right mind, can sit back and say, wow, ain't you glad we was almost killed today? Or ain't you glad we shot and killed so many people today? Only a person that is deranged, deliriously deranged, is going to find war appealing. I couldn't tell you the times that my grandmother used to sit and talk to us and tell us about her mother's mother that had to hide. They had to hide underneath the houses to keep from the soldiers, the Union soldiers coming in and raping the girls. They went ahead and come in and stole the chickens, killed the cows, and sometimes burnt the buildings. But if they didn't hide, if those young girls didn't hide, they was substance of being torn even further because of the aggressionness that was going on pertaining to war. When people look at the glamour that Hollywood portrays, you can't smell the smell. You can't fully engulf in what you are hearing. You can't feel the feel of hungry stomachs and people being stabbed and killed and mutilated and raped. You can't feel these things. So Hollywood can dress these things up and make them look not quite as horrible as what they truly are. When you look at this should be a gut-wrenching, hair-raising event for any human being that reads this and just got through hearing this in understanding the fundamental facts about what could actually escalate out of all this. It is sickening to think that we have a president that would stoop so low in bringing this nation to its very knees. I don't know how Donald Trump will be remembered. I was hoping that he would leave elegantly. I was hoping that eventually he would come to his senses and that he would realize the battle that he was engaged in was a senseless, immature, battle, and that the final results wasn't going to be nothing but total chaos. Let's say if he did win. Let's look at this from a different perspective. Let's say total hell broke out January the 6th. Let's say they engaged into a bloodbath. Shoot them up, bang them up. War-torn nation. After he's engaged in such of affairs, let's say he wins. Is this man ultimately going to be able to take charge of the Senate and Congress and having a respectful position in the eyes of the majority towards being able to run a nation that is already 27, 28, 29 trillion dollars in debt? Is he going to be able to have the clout in being able to tell other military officials in foreign soils that this is what we're going to do? We're going to stop the aid. We're going to project in not helping this particular country and form a barrier because we don't agree with what they're doing. I mean, the way that democracy is run, it's run similar towards a watch, a perfectly designed watch that every integral detail of that watch has to be perfectly in unison with each other cog to make that watch run perfectly. It's the same way with democracy. Every integral detail has to be run to fit each other. And whenever you no longer have one entity that's in communications with the other towards working with each other, instead of you having a democracy, you have chaos. You have a distorted, delirious, put together, botched up, whatever word you want to use, disorganized, rambling government, if you even want to call it a government. It's the same thing as what goes on in your banana republic over in third world countries. It's the most craziest thing that I thought that I'd ever look at towards somebody trying to pull the wool over people's eyes right here in America. It's screwy. But in addition to it being screwy, it's very dangerous. It's very, very dangerous to even have this on the table, to even propose an ideal, because you have weak-minded people out there that will just eat this up, pertaining to your Jerry Springer group of people out there. And once more, these are the people that I guess Donald Trump is solely relying upon. That's going to be on the front lines pertaining to his ideology. This is sad. There's nothing about this that is happy or needs to be rewarded or needs to be looked upon in any type of a good way. This is sad that it has come to this over this particular presidency.
According to veteran Washington Post columnist David Ignatius, this is a scheme that government officials are worried that Trump might actually attempt to put into motion. Ignatius writes, quote, "This threat, while unlikely to materialize, is concerning senior officials, including Republicans who have supported Trump in the past, but believe he's now threatening to overstep the constitutional limits on his power. Government officials fear that if violence spreads, Trump could invoke the Insurrection Act to mobilize the military. Then Trump might use military capabilities, Michael Flynn's word, to rerun the November 3rd election in swing states, as suggested by Michael Flynn." The headline on this piece is sobering, by the way. It's, quote, "Until Biden's win is certified, the U.S. remains vulnerable." Stuff is wild. Joining us now, Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. He's a member of the Judiciary Committee, and maybe more importantly for this conversation, he's a former constitutional law professor. Congressman Raskin, good to see you. Thank you for your time this evening. I'm not a constitutional lawyer. I'm no lawyer at all. Everything I've ever learned comes from Law and Order and guests like you. Is this even a thing? Can this possibly happen?
Well, let's see. Are you talking about the inside strategy or the outside strategy for Trump?
Yeah, good question.
On the inside, it is absolutely outlandish and whimsical. We've had the Electoral Count Act of 1887 in place for more than a century. And what they want to do suddenly is to deify the Senate president, here Mike Pence, essentially to turn over all substantive decision making to him when the vice president has always acted in an administrative and ministerial capacity. Think of it like the chief justice in an impeachment tribunal. He's basically there to preside over the proceedings, but not to usurp Congress's right to make the decisions about the counting of the electors. In any event, counting of the electors here should be the easiest thing in the world because we all agree, and every court of the land agrees exactly, what the electoral count is at this point. It's 306 to 232, the same margin that Donald Trump declared a landslide when he beat Hillary Clinton by that same margin. So the outside strategy is to rile up the Proud Boys and the Aryan nations and all of the extreme right. I mean, he told them to stand back and stand by, and this is the big moment he and they have been waiting for. And the question that members are talking about is, does he just want to see violence and mayhem, which is obviously a very deep part of his nature, or does he want to use that as a pretext for trying to impose military authoritarianism at the last minute to save
that's the question. That's the thing we need to figure out. Could be one thing if the Proud Boys and white supremacists show up in Washington, and there are ways in which that can be dealt with. It's never going to be a good thing. But Donald Trump has a propensity to call for federal troops. He keeps telling mayors, if you can't control your city, I'll send in federal troops. He tells governors the same thing. So now he could be creating the pretext for the intervention of either National Guard or military, which we've seen him do before. Does that concern you?
Well, he's called on National Guard before. Unfortunately, Maryland, my state, did dispatch some National Guard troops in that, the unlawful police riot that Attorney General Barr ordered in Lafayette Square. I don't think that's going to be happening again, and a lot of states are refusing to participate in it. In any event, the military should be very much on notice that it must conform to the rule of law and that the oaths that they swear are to the Constitution of the United States and to the people and not to the president. This is not a banana republic, despite what the president wants to turn us into. So, I would be more afraid of a military coup had Donald Trump not spent his entire administration insulting the military and calling them, fools and idiots and fuckers for serving the country. So I don't think that there's some kind of secret fifth column that wants to break away from the Republic and get behind Donald Trump, the kind of thing that Aaron Burr might have dreamed of.
What is this Louis Gohmert effort going to look like? He needs at least one senator, I understand, to support him, and there may be a senator who's prepared to support him. And then this actually becomes a debate in Congress on January 6th. How does that play out for you?
Well, what you're referring to there is that every member of the House or the Senate has the right to object to the counting of particular electors. And some of the right-wing Trump cultists are saying that they're going to object. But you do need at least one person from the Senate side. So if a senator went with them, at that point they would state their objection, and there's no debate right at the moment. We resolve to our separate chambers, and the House and the Senate would each conduct 2 hours of debate. Each side would have 1 hour with 12 members allowed to speak for 5 minutes apiece on each side. And then the House would vote and the Senate would vote. But here's the thing, assuming that COVID-19 doesn't sideline enough members for the Republicans to have some kind of temporary majority, the House is going to reject all of these completely ludicrous suggestions. And so as long as the House objects, regardless of what the Senate does, I think the Senate will override the objection too. But as long as the House rejects the objection, it doesn't go anyplace. At that point, the objection is killed, it's nullified. And if there's a second slate put forward, which hasn't happened yet, but they keep talking about it, or a standoff between the House and the Senate, it goes to the governor of the state for the certificate of ascertainment. So I don't think they have any real plays there. But the Gohmert suit in court is trying to say that the vice president gets to decide all of these things, and that will be thrown out like every other suit that they've brought. I think that they have lost like 52 or 53 lawsuits across the country with more than 88 judges rejecting and castigating them for the nonsense they're bringing forward.
Congressman, you make us smarter every time we talk. Thank you for that. Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland, thank you for your time tonight, sir. Don't turn your camera off. We're going to need it in just a minute. President Trump's repeated efforts to upend the results of the election are playing out as millions in this country continue to suffer the devastating economic effects of the coronavirus pandemic. For those Americans, Donald Trump's refusal to immediately sign the stimulus bill led to nothing but heartache over the Christmas holidays. Jennifer Bryant, a mother of 5 in Georgia, had been relying on federal unemployment benefits. Given that she was behind on rent, she breathed a sigh of relief knowing that Congress had extended a moratorium on evictions. But when President Trump upended negotiations right before the holidays, it devastated her family. Ms. Bryant told the New York Times, quote, "I went to bed in tears. To have our hope pulled out from under us, our lifeline, it was devastating." Even though her benefits are set to be restored, President Trump's stunt means that millions of people suffered needlessly and others may be forced to wait weeks more for government aid. Trump's delay in signing the bill caused benefits to lapse for Americans all across the country.
Look at this. Whenever things like this occurs, then it automatically gives the financial institutions the legal right to now clamp on to the ongoing problem of people's problems, more problems, because now they're going to put penalty fees, late charges, etc., plus the original agreement that they made with this institution has been broken, and now, because it's been broken, gives the institution the upper leg to the degree that if they desire, they could actually foreclose on this loan and evict these people immediately simply because the original agreement had been broken. It don't matter why it was broken. No one says in the clause that if there is a natural catastrophe such as a war or a pandemic, we don't have that power. No. It's not in that clause. They still have the power, once that agreement's been broken, that they can go in and foreclose on that home or on that purchase. It don't matter if it's a car. It don't matter if it's a 18-wheeler worth $500,000 or if it's a combine worth $1 million. They can foreclose. Each delaying day adds that many more penalties and charges that somebody is either going to have to pay for or these institutions are going to have to be willing to waive. And why would an institution be willing to waive something? Because that's the way that it makes its money to begin with, is off of, it panhandles off of other people's grief and off of other people's sorrow. That's how the rich become rich. Not necessarily all of them, but that's how a great deal of them here in America has become rich, is because they was at the right place at the right time and they took advantage of that situation. That's what we're staring down the barrels of here. Every time somebody like Donald Trump delays something, it empowers the people that's already got the power. And it makes those that are on the cutting edge even that much weaker, because now they got to go back and reformulate a brand new agreement under brand new guidelines. That could be absolutely devastating to the people that originally had the agreement to begin with. This is a formula of catastrophe. And instead of Donald Trump being part of the solution to the problem, he's actually exacerbating the problem. He's adding to the problem. I want the people that was flag-toting Trump enthusiast to look at this very, very carefully as they come to their consciousness of understanding this is the person that they wanted to be in charge for the next 4 years. Just today, I drove by a person's house and they had more Trump signs in the front of their yard. And I actually thought once about stopping and asking them, has the election opened back up? Are we still in the process of voting for Donald J. Trump? Because their yard was packed full of signs. Signs and flags of Donald Trump. And it's not the first person that I've drove by and seen these type of images. How come this man continues to want to keep beating a dead horse? That's my question. That's the reason why certain people, I'm talking about high-to-do people here in America, various people right here in Tennessee, have made statements that Donald Trump is mentally incapable and he is on the brink of basically losing his mind. Needs to be, I've actually heard some of them say that he needs to be institutionalized. Basically a madman. You know, whenever the emperor rips off all his clothes and he's naked, but he's sitting there telling you that he's not. Believe it or not, he is naked. If he's done ripped off all his clothes and he's standing in front of you naked, he's naked. Regardless of what he says, he's naked. And whenever you have somebody like Donald Trump that is preying, I'm going to use the word preying, on weak-minded people, you have a recipe of a catastrophe. I keep telling myself it can't get no worse. It can't get no worse, Dennis. But you know, whenever you read reports like this and you see stuff like this, it's really a mind-boggling, hair-scratching, blood-curdling, hair-raising event. Because yes, it could actually get worse. We're talking about the United States of America that was founded off of laws and certain standards. People that has made vows in keeping the Constitution. We're talking about a country that's supposed to be civilized.
Meaning more uncertainty and more pain at a time when they are already struggling. Joining us now from the same room you just saw, Sarah Bloom Raskin, who served as Deputy Secretary of the Treasury under President Obama. Well, the room changed. It's a different room. I thought it was going to be the same room. If the name sounds familiar, it's because Ms. Bloom Raskin is married to our previous guest, Congressman Raskin. Sarah, thank you for being on the show. I did not expect you to be in a different room, but thank you for being with us tonight.
Happy to be with you.
Let's just talk about this for a second. We are talking about literally millions. I'm not making that up. We're not exaggerating in saying it. There are about 14 million people directly relying on these benefits that will be extended by this bill. These are people who are struggling. They're behind on their rent. We've talked to people who are making, grocery decisions and eating less food in America than they would be. By delaying that money, we not only hurt them, but you hurt every other part of the economy. You hurt the grocery stores. You hurt the businesses that they spend. There's no economic sense to what Donald Trump was trying to do.
That's exactly right, Ellie. This delay has really exacerbated the financial anxiety that so many Americans are dealing with. And these are Americans, remember, who have lost jobs or who are underemployed right now, who, through no fault of their own. I mean, a massive pandemic swept through our country and turned demand for goods and services way, way down. And as a result, many people, upwards of 12 million, really, lost jobs, lost the wherewithal to be able to make utility payments, make rent payments.
And it's not over with yet. I mean, the hospitals right now out in California are overwhelmed. Overwhelmed. And it's not just hospitals in California. There's other hospitals in various parts of the country that are overwhelmed of people being sick and dying.
Make their mortgage payments, put food on the table. So essentially, the hardship is really quite real here, and every day matters in these instances. So this is really no laughing matter. The delay is significant, and then of course there's the implementation piece, right? So the Treasury has to has to print out those checks and get them out the door. And that's not timeless. That takes time. So there's also this implementation piece, which I think is going to be quite painful.
So the irony is that Donald Trump came up with this scheme to give people $2,000, which I actually think is a better plan. And it's what Democrats have been fighting for all the time. But Mitch McConnell had made the argument that he has people in his caucus who either do not want to see the increase in the deficit that would cause, or don't want what we used to call moral hazard. They don't want to be sending the message that we're just going to pay for people to stay home, even though nobody's staying home by choice. The issue here is that this administration in particular ran up the deficit in an historic fashion for tax cuts that we weren't clamoring for. But now we're worried about doing so on the backs of people who have not had a check from the government in months.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, coming into the pandemic, the fiscal space wasn't great for precisely the reason you mentioned. A lot of the spending had gone up because of the tax cuts, which preceded the pandemic, and that left the country really in a much more vulnerable fiscal space once we got hit with a true emergency. And so the fiscal path is really not a long one. That said, you will see most economists, most policymakers really agree with the idea that this is an absolute emergency, one that is going to demand significant fiscal assistance. And of course, we had one, and that was the CARES Act, and that was a significant piece, but it was needed to be followed by what the House certainly did in the HEROES Act back in May, and then what was finally signed Sunday night, which is the stimulus, or I should say the economic assistance that is now in play, but coming really much too late.
Sarah Bloom Raskin, thank you so much for your time tonight. Former Deputy Secretary of the Treasury under President Obama, and our great thanks to the Raskin household for your support of the Rachel Maddow Show this evening. Have a good night.
You too.
We are getting word tonight, by the way, about a tactic that might just get the Senate to vote on those $2,000 COVID relief checks. This is new. Senator Bernie Sanders says tonight that he's going to try and force a vote on that relief bill. He says he will filibuster the vote to override Trump's defense bill veto, which we expect would be passed by Republicans, unless Republicans in the Senate bring those $2,000 payments up for a vote. Now, with only a few days of crucial campaign time left for Senators Loeffler and Perdue in their Georgia runoff races, a filibuster could mean staying in D.C. through the holiday weekend, so that carries an unusual amount of weight. Senator Sanders will join us right here live tomorrow night to bring you up to date on what has happened. I think we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more after this.
Peacock's got...
There you go, to my viewers. That's what we're staring at. Come January 6th, which is about less than about 10 days away. This is steadily creeping up onto the American people. And if we're not being bombarded by one problem, we're being bombarded by another. The American people right now are basically under siege. And if we're not being under siege in one form, we're being under siege in another. And to think that we have somebody up in the office right now that either don't care or is incapable of caring about what's really going on is just, it's asinizing. It's absolutely asinizing to think that we have somebody in there that are playing these type of games that would basically bring this nation to its knees. It's sad. Good luck to all of us. Coming from the Windmill Ministries here at 291 Thompson Road, Chiron, Tennessee, zip code 38255. Good luck to all of us pertaining to the things that we are now having to endure. If there's ever been a time that we needed to stick together and become more unified and pray together and pray for each other, it is today. These are all the signs of the end times that the Bible, the book of life, taught us to be prepared of looking out for. These are all the beginning sorrows and the signs that are now unfolding right in front of our very eyes.